Today I'm talking to Dr. Penny Trayner, who is a clinical director in neuropsychology. And Penny, we've had lots of conversations around innovation, technology and transformation in clinical. And I thought this would make a great interview for our audience to understand, I suppose, the impact of transformation from your point of view as a clinical lead, if you like, and a clinical director. So my first question is, in terms of transformation, innovation and technology, how have you seen sort of transformation affect the actual sort of operational side of the work that you do?
Yeah, so I have always worked slightly remotely in one form or another because our service covers the entire United Kingdom. It's been a necessity, but actually the last 9 months has sort of accelerated us in bringing forward and expanding them. So telehealth in psychology or medicine is defined as actually delivering the therapy remotely. So not just having a phone call, but actually the method of delivery being through these remote video methods or telephone methods. It's always existed. There's actually a reasonable evidence base in psychology, but suddenly we've had to do it for everything that we do. So we've gone from an entirely, well, probably in my case, a mixed model where probably 90% of it was face-to-face, maybe 10%. Whereas now I am almost sort of 95% remote delivery, so delivering telehealth on a daily basis in multiple ways, having to get to grips with all the different types of technology and what it can bring, also having to think about some of the challenges in terms of adaptations and people's needs and making sure that you know everything that we're delivering is actually getting to the people that it needs to get to. A good example is use of things like closed captioning in Zoom software and Teams software, and making sure those things are really effective and help meetings. So I think that was a general direction things were going, and we have just been, you know, massively accelerated through that. So, like I say, what we're seeing now are these therapies and assessments, etc., being delivered entirely remotely, and we're sort of building, I guess, a practice-based evidence around that and around best practice. And as a result, it's really united the international community from a clinical point of view. So we're learning a lot from our colleagues in the States and Australia in particular, who have long since had to address this issue of accessing people over a large geographical area. So they're in many ways ahead of the game with us, so we've been able to draw a lot from those colleagues. So yeah, changes to much more of a digital revolution, but also making sure that we're actually evaluating that effectively and not just delivering stuff thinking that it's doing what it's doing, actually having back on that and making use of technology to aid us with that. Yeah, so it's been a busy few months, really.
I'm sure. And how has it been received? What's the sort of feedback from the 10% of people that have been used to meeting you or somebody like you face to face? Are they comfortable with the transition to telehealth?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's not suitable for everyone. And there have been some people, a minority of people, that have completely opted out of it and said they would just prefer to wait until we're able to meet, you know, in a traditional face-to-face method. Whether that ever comes back in that size anymore is another matter, really, because actually what we're seeing is actually for the people that have been adopting it, a lot of them are finding therapy much more accessible. They're finding it much more less draining and less demanding for them to be able to access. Much easier for you to be able to sit in your house and just click on your video remote software without having to think about getting to an appointment, all the drama and all the things with that. So I think a lot of people have found it absolutely really, really helpful to them, you know, myself included. I've really enjoyed aspects of it, but for lots of reasons there are some people that's just not suitable for. Often perhaps when there's sort of communication issues, so they might need to use assistive communication, which just makes it very difficult sometimes to link in with some of this technology. That's not to say it's not coming. And there are some things in psychology that we've had problems with because our tests are not standardized to be delivered remotely. It's just something we've not done. There's a very small evidence base in child work, particularly a small base, but in adult work there is a little bit more. We're building that very, very quickly. So it's limited what we're able to deliver. And we've had to really think creatively about how we go about making sure that we're getting all those assessments done in the most safe but valid way. So it's meant a lot of kind of thinking on your feet and, again, liaising with colleagues nationally and internationally to work out best practice. So I've really enjoyed that. There's been a lot of collaboration, a lot of rolling up our sleeves and a lot of kind of really thinking through problem solving, which was part of the reason I got into being a psychologist, really, to solve problems. So it's been quite nice.
Good. And in terms of same question, really, innovation, digital transformation, but more so on sort of the care plan and strategy. What sort of what have you sort of specifically used that has sort of given you good benefit, and what have you seen has changed on that sort of element of your role?
Yeah, so as I said before, I'd already been doing a little bit of remote working, and so to address that, about 18 months ago, I invented some software through my service to facilitate us being able to meet and collaborate remotely, because it was already a problem for me. Act as clinical lead for a number of teams across the UK and bring all that information together effectively and in a timely manner. It was really quite challenging. So I've been using my software, which allows teams to meet and collaborate together from wherever they are, whether it be nationally or around the world, and pulls all their data together and allows the whole team to be up to date, as well as family members and anyone else involved, and facilitates us scoring all of that digitally. And then it just means that we can have remote meetings that are much more efficient, where the data is available to everyone and fully up to date, which has been really helpful. So yeah, it was great that we already had that going, and it's something we're now expanding out. And obviously now we're talking to NHS services and bigger providers who are now looking to introduce it into their services. But on a sort of a more kind of micro level, I guess, it has been just getting to grips with some of these bits of technology that have been really, really useful. So these video platforms are absolutely invaluable. It's not the same as meeting someone in person, but it does bring a little bit of that human element to it, which is really important to us as human beings in terms of how we communicate. So I think it has made therapy, telehealth, technology much more accessible to everyone, that everyone's doing this at home with their grandparents, with their family members, so it doesn't feel as weird as it used to a few years ago. So definitely recommend checking out my software if anyone's interested in looking at how they can collaborate. But I think it's very much modeled on the same premises, Monday.com, lots of these ClickUp, lots of these management softwares, where it's just about getting all your team data down in one place and having something to do the hard work for you and organize. So yeah, those have been really, really helpful in keeping us going.
And where do you, because I know you're sort of very pro innovation and transformation. What have you sort of seen, article wise and speaking to companies in terms of technologies that will help you sort of administer a care plan to a sort of service user? I know, we were discussing a solution with augmented reality as an example. What sort of realistically do you think might, if we spoke in 12 months time, what do you think realistically you might be telling me about in 12 months?
I think augmented and virtual reality is a really realistic option for a lot of people. If you log onto, a very famous social media platform, they are currently, you can order, a VR headset from them and have that delivered to your home. And, it allows people to create these environments where we can deliver a lot of rehabilitation skills, but we can control it, manage it. It's not suitable for everyone. I have spoken to the service users I see have acquired brain injury, and have spoken to some who find it does something to their perception, and sometimes it can be affected or altered afterwards, and they can find it quite difficult to engage in reality afterwards, which is where I think augmented reality comes in. Because I think, that's already around us so much, and I think where it's been used already has been very much in the entertainment industry. But seeing that actually, if we can use those technologies to create little rehab centers in people's homes, so that I can be here, you can be there, and I can be delivering a program to you, helping you, assisting you, and having cameras that are good enough to be able to translate what that person's doing back to me, so I can deliver that from my office. I think that's fantastic. I think very realistic. Again, I think people are much more used to seeing that now as a good option, as opposed to a lesser option. I think if you'd asked me 12 months ago, people would have said, actually, I'd rather see you in person. It's probably a lesser option to see you virtually. Whereas actually now, I think they see that you can be seen more often, more regularly. You can be seen in your home, and actually we can deliver rehab where people actually need it. The other thing I think, which has been around for a while, but I think is really, really exciting, is all of these, and it's not my field because I'm not a physiotherapist, but it's definitely in my field to know about, is all the kind of exoskeleton work and all this, I keep saying Iron Man type, these suits that where it's absolutely incredible. And where it really made me mindful of my role as a psychologist is I spoke to a physio colleague last week who was talking about how she really has to try and encourage the people that she worked with to keep in good physical condition, because these things might not be an option for them now, but in 2 years they might be. And if they're not in a good physical condition, able to access them, that's going to close more doors for them. And so it made me really mindful of, you know, just actually helping people prepare for that mentally, as well as keeping them motivated, and perhaps seeing that actually you might not be able to do this now, but in a couple of years' time. The other thing I think is really exciting are the self-drive cars, because it's kind of gone quiet a bit, but I think with the announcement that diesel cars and petrol cars are being phased out, we're going to see a massive rise in that. And actually, when I started my career, I used to have to say to some people, you know, I'm not sure if you're ever going to be able to drive, but I can't say that now. You know, now you can be parking your car. So if people are able to do that, I mean, how liberating for them in terms of their lives and not having to be dependent on, you know, public transport and you know, all those other options and other people to get where they're going. So I think people are going to be more independent. I think technology is going to allow more rehab and more interventions to happen in people's homes. But I think this, you know, where the physical stuff is really going to take off, I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. And I think we as a society are now much more used to engaging with that idea of technology interfacing with our real lives. So I think if you saw someone walking towards you dressed in, you know, a suit that is an exoskeleton that's very much machine, I don't think that would be as concerning to people as it might have been, you know, a few years ago. I think it's more of a familiar to sight. So I'm excited to see where people can go to.
Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. The final question really was how and if your sort of role has changed as a clinical director. I was also interested to understand your experiences on the relationship that you had with, you know, in old terms, the sort of CTO, the Director of Technology, which we may now call Director of Digital. Has that sort of relationship changed and evolved because of the, you know, sort of technologies that we're now talking about? Because you can't just plug these things in; they need to sort of be integrated into the environment. How is that sort of landscape between clinical director and digital director changed?
That's a really excellent question, and it absolutely has changed. I think previously the digital side of the operations was seen as very much supporting the infrastructure, the administration of the business, rather than being the main mechanism of delivery of the actual services. And now it is the main mechanism of delivery. It isn't simply good enough to just be picking out different random digital solutions at random and just putting them in. It really needs that kind of clinical look at them to see what's going to be helpful and what actually is going to be a good substitute for whatever we're doing, or what has a good evidence base and how do we evaluate that evidence base. So whereas previously it was a case of, here's this new technology we're going to use, we'll bring it in, okay, we roll it out. It's now a case of, okay, we're aware that actually in order to deliver this in this way, we need to be doing X, Y, and Z. And then it's a matter of interfacing with the CTO to think about what infrastructure do we have in terms of cloud software, in terms of digital security, in terms of the ability to access different digital solutions in different countries. So a lot of these platforms don't necessarily run in the UK. So there's a lot of other issues that have to be considered, but actually you've got to do them in conjunction now with the clinical director about thinking about what do we need to be doing to be able to deliver a clinical service most effectively and with an evidence base, rather than just, it looks really shiny, can we have it? So I think a good example of this in psychology was you can't, when we're doing remote assessments, we are not permitted to share the materials over video because that would be breaching copyright. But if you get a visualizer, which is something different, a type of camera, then you are able to do that. So it's just actually having, as a clinician, to understand that and to safeguard that, but also understanding the differences between those different technologies and what is it we actually need for the job that we're trying to do. And I think you can only do that in collaboration with someone that's got perhaps the breadth of looking at what the digital world is, the digital landscape looks like, but us being able to translate, well, actually, is that delivering what we need, and is it delivering it in an effective way, and is there an evidence base for it? So yeah, that has definitely changed, a much closer working relationship. I almost think as clinical directors as well, we're kind of becoming digital experts, and actually, interestingly, they've added something in that we're having a consultation at the moment on standards of proficiency for practitioner psychologists.
Oh, okay.
Or they've proposed changing in there about a requirement to have a level of digital literacy in order to be able to do this stuff. So I think that's quite an interesting shift in the landscape. just from a regulation point of view, that they're just kind of pointing us in that direction, saying you need to be able to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the role of clinical director and indeed sort of CTO has changed, and that I suppose the emphasis on the domain knowledge, i.e. in this case clinical, or in the CTO case the technology, there is so much more to both roles now. So the CTO needs to be involved in, I don't know, profit and loss, strategy, vision, externally facing, commercially minded. So they're no longer the person just technology. And for the clinical director, yeah, I mean you sound pretty fluent in technology, but I'm sure that there's many people who don't naturally gravitate towards that. So it's interesting to hear that's being taken up at a sort of in much earlier stages.
Yeah, it's a great change. I think it's happened, but I think from a profession point of view, we perhaps need to think about how that's going to work, because I think just putting it in our guidelines is not necessarily sufficient for us to get there. But I think just that we have an onus to support trainees and people coming up in all their other skills, that this is another branch of your clinical skills now. Technology is a part of what we do. So I think I think it's quite interesting and exciting, but it's going to be an interesting time of change, I think. And I think that transformation is happening, and I think what's nice is now feeling that there's not just one or two of us doing it, that everyone is collaborating on that and wanting to make it better. So it's suddenly a much more big open community of people who are trying to do the same thing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Good stuff.